one specific concern that I think industry has, and I believe at this point in time it looks like the centre seems to have given up hope on any change, and that is this business of central registration or centralized registration. State governments are not in favour of it. Is there any possibility, any wriggle room at all that you see there, or do you think that for now industry is going to just have to live with this?
So certain sectors like, especially in the services sector, insurance, telecom, banking, they have a lot of concerns for having to register with different states, and there would be a commensurate increase in their compliance cost. But this was a major challenge because to have a consensus among the GST Council, this was a specific request of the states that they should have separate registration in each state. So it will be difficult for me to answer that question, whether it is final or not, but it is definitely a concern on board.
It is definitely a concern, and Rohan Shah, we've talked about this. It looks very clear at this point in time that the centre is perhaps not going to be able to get states to come on board as far as this particular concern goes. How big a challenge is this going to be?
It's going to be a very, very large challenge in terms of the fact that, not only is the registration, then there is follow-on compliance, and there are related issues in terms of when you make that compliance is not just an act of compliance, it has a certain resonance in terms of credits. It therefore has a cost impact on you. So I think these are serious challenges. One might say that the people afflicted have the resources to handle the challenges, whether it's banks or telecom or what have you.
One of the critical pieces is yet to be finalized, and that has to do with rates, and the finance minister has made it very clear that that exercise will only begin after the next meeting of the GST Council, which is on the 18th and the 19th of May, and so we will perhaps have clarity on rates only in June, perhaps start of June or the middle of June, and we're talking about a 1st of July rollout. Even if the Revenue Secretary says that this is a mechanical exercise, that the fitment of rates is a mechanical exercise, should it really be a mechanical exercise? The whole point of the GST was to try and see how much lower you can perhaps try and bring down rates. And B, is it then going to give you enough time, if we get the final rates and the Tariff Act is moved in Parliament only in June, to be able to roll out on 1st of July?
What is being said is there is an equivalence principle.
Yeah.
And in the equivalence principle, if you are within 2 percentage points lower or higher, you will move into the rate. But let's look at two very important baskets. Let's just look at textiles. If you ask anybody what is the effective tax rate of textile, there is a report somewhere, I'm told, of the chief economic advisor saying it's 7.2%. Elsewhere, there are articles saying this should be taxed at 12 to 18%.
Yeah.
Where is the concept of equivalence? You look at gems and jewelry. There is a report to say your effective rate is 1.2%. But if we count credits which are lost in the system, it's 12%. Now, what is this divergence? It's a multiple of 10 between 1.2 and 12.
Yeah.
So I don't think it is just as easy a situation of saying it's a mechanical fitment, because for many industries, there is just no basis of anybody to say this is the effective rate, because there are pockets which are not taxed, there are pockets which don't have credit. And for this sort of an exercise, which really the ultimate arithmetic of GST is that rate, for you to push it back to this stage and say you should have an ability to predict it, I think is shortchanging a very important process. I think it's far more important than a mechanical exercise.
And I think this echoes the sentiment across industry that, this business of, well, it's easy to predict and it's largely a mechanical exercise, and hence there shouldn't be a problem to roll out on the 1st of July because it can be done.
So let me mention two things. One is that every meeting of the GST Council is preceded by a series of meetings between the central and the state tax officials, and the working on the rates also has been going on as to what would be the revenue estimations if an item X was in this category, 5% or in 12% or 18%. There is a certain basis for determining whether the raw material should be in this bracket and the intermediate product should be in a particular bracket, and then the final product should be in a higher bracket, and the value addition considerations have to be taken into consideration. So these are the considerations which the tax tariff, the people who are making the decisions have in mind. The calculations are already done, and now the fitment of the specific commodities in particular tax brackets is to be determined when the GST Council meets. And there are certain items of common use which would be in the 5% or the 0% rate. Luxury items would be in the 28% rate.
Yeah.
Rest would be in between 12 and 18%, a large segment, and that would also perhaps help in achieving the principle of equivalence, as you mentioned. So, let's see how the final decisions are taken to fit these things.
Let me move to another contentious issue, Mr. Swarup, and that has to do with anti-profiteering. And I know that through the course of the day here today, I'm sure that has been an issue that has been discussed. Again, the Revenue Secretary in his interview to me said that this is not something that, there'll be a light touch approach. We don't even know whether this will be something that we would like to take forward beyond the transitional period. And he said the transitional period could be anywhere between 1 and 2 years. But this has caused a great degree of consternation. What is your message here to this audience here today as far as the anti-profiteering clause is concerned?
So let me assure you that this would not, one should not have an apprehension in this regard, because it cannot be arbitrary. It has to be based on certain, data. It has to be based on certain calculations, and the authority which will be determining this would follow a principle of natural justice, and there would be enough opportunity. And so let us not have apprehension. It is a clause which reflects the concern of the government that the implementation of GST should not result in any inflationary pressures on the economy. So with that concern in mind, this provision has been brought in. So as of now, I think we should not have any concerns in this regard.
No concerns? Government says don't have concerns. Are you convinced?
No, my worry is, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing government say, don't worry, because we will use it in very limited situations. We will be very, very cautious. So if the situation is that it will be used very rarely, then I'm saying it will be used rarely. And now weigh the amount of public outcry on this issue. Is it worthwhile to have created so much negative sentiment for something which you are saying you will probably never use? And therefore, is the right approach that we will be cautious but you be careful, or is the right approach to say, if you are never going to use it, we're just going to put it on ice. If we see that people are misbehaving, we'll activate it, but we are not going to activate it now. I think when you weigh the balance between the debate and what they hope to achieve, it's a very unequal balance.
Mr. Lakshmi Kumar?
My experience in the last several years dealing with the tax department is that if in this country, as one famous person said, only two people decide, either Inspector Central Excise or Supreme Court. Nothing in between. If an officer says, in this particular case, I got a complaint from a recipient, there is a profit is unduly made because of the GST, and you start the proceedings, I think everybody will say law will take its course. If one officer has done it, other officers can also and will do. Either the provisions are kept in abeyance by law, or it will be let loose. But I don't think anything in between. I am not sounding pessimistic, but this section 171 will be used very frequently, if not flagrantly, to the detriment of the sentiments of whatever we are talking about. It will be. Because when the government says I am going to reduce from, say, 24-25% to 18%, and if any recipient comes and says that I am not given 6% reduction, I got only 2% reduction, and he has made a profit out of this GST, etc., in his tax, I don't think anybody can stop.
Certainly hope that the road to GST, which is paved with good intentions, actually does deliver on the results as well. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us here at the concluding session of the CNBC TV 18 Taxsutra GST Summit. Thank you very much for your participation.